With Russia in economic crisis and tensions simmering over Ukraine, the world is watching Vladimir Putin. Tonight, the inside story of the Russian president's rise to power.
He has got so many guilty secrets, so much money's been stolen, that he doesn't really trust anyone to keep him safe if he steps down from power.
Who is Putin? Introduction.
Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, born 7 October 1952, is a Russian politician, intelligence officer who is the president of Russia. A position he has filled since 2012 and previously from 1999 until 2008. He was also the Prime Minister from 1999 to 2000 and again from 2008 to 2012. Putin is the second longest current serving European president after Alexander Lukashenko of neighboring Belarus. Putin was born in Leningrad, now Saint Petersburg, and studied law at Leningrad State University, graduating in 1975.
He wasn't born rich, and to understand him, you need to go to his home city, Saint Petersburg. This is where he grew up, there on the 5th floor. Putin's family had one room in a shared apartment, no hot water and a shared kitchen in the corridor. Vladimir Putin grew up in poverty.
He worked as a KGB foreign intelligence officer for 16 years, rising to the rank of lieutenant colonel before resigning in 1991 to begin a political career in St. Petersburg. He moved to Moscow in 1996 to join the administration of President Boris Yeltsin. He briefly served as director of the Federal Security Service (FSB) and secretary of the Security Council before being appointed as prime minister in August 1999. After the resignation of Yeltsin, Putin became acting president and less than 4 months later was elected outright to his first term as president and was re-elected in 2004. As he was then constitutionally limited to 2 consecutive terms as president, Putin served as prime minister again from 2008 to 2012 under Dmitry Medvedev and returned to the presidency in 2012 in an election marred by allegations of fraud and protests. He was re-elected again in 2018. In April 2021, following a referendum, he signed into law constitutional amendments including one that would allow him to run for re-election twice more, potentially extending his presidency to 2036. During Putin's first tenure as president, the Russian economy grew for 8 consecutive years, with GDP measured by purchasing power increasing by 72%. Russian self-assessed life satisfaction rose significantly. The growth was a result of a 5-fold increase in the price of oil and gas, which constitute the majority of Russian exports, recovery from the post-communist depression and financial crises, a rise in foreign investment, and prudent economic and fiscal policies. Putin also led Russia to victory in the Second Chechen War. Serving as prime minister under Medvedev, he oversaw large-scale military reform and police reform, as well as Russia's victory in the Russo-Georgian War. During his third term as president, falling oil prices coupled with international sanctions imposed at the beginning of 2014 after Russia launched a military intervention in Ukraine and annexed Crimea led to GDP shrinking by 3.7% in 2015, though the Russian economy rebounded in 2016 with 0.3% GDP growth. During his fourth term as president, the COVID-19 pandemic hit Russia, and Putin ordered a full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, leading to further sanctions being imposed against Russia, causing a financial crisis. Other developments under Putin have included the construction of oil and gas pipelines, the restoration of the satellite navigation system GLONASS, and the building of infrastructure for international events such as the 2014 Winter Olympics in Sochi and the 2018 FIFA World Cup.
Abramovich and other wealthy Russians are expected to pay for important projects like hosting the 2018 World Cup.
Я не исключаю, что господин Абрамович может принять участие в одном из таких проектов. Но пусть раскошелится немножко, ничего страшного, у него будет, у него много там денег.
FIFA World Cup, ladies and gentlemen, will be organized in Russia.
Under Putin's leadership, Russia has shifted to authoritarianism. Experts do not consider Russia a democracy, citing the jailing and repression of political opponents, the intimidation and suppression of the free press, and the lack of free and fair elections. Russia has scored poorly on Transparency International's Corruption Perceptions Index, the Economist Intelligence Unit's Democracy Index, and Freedom House's Freedom and the World Index.
Early life.
Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin was born on 7 October 1952 in Leningrad, Russian SFSR, Soviet Union, now Saint Petersburg, Russia, the youngest of three children of Vladimir Spiridonovich Putin, 1911-1999, and Maria Ivanovna Putina, née Shelemova, 1911-1998. Spiridon Putin, Vladimir Putin's grandfather, was a personal cook to Vladimir Lenin and Joseph Stalin.
He wasn't born rich, and to understand him, you need to go to his home city, St. Petersburg.
This is where he grew up. There, on the 5th floor, Putin's family had one room in a shared apartment, no hot water, and a shared kitchen in the corridor. Vladimir Putin grew up in poverty.
Putin's birth was preceded by the deaths of two brothers, Viktor and Albert, born in the mid-1930s. Albert died in infancy and Viktor died of diphtheria during the siege of Leningrad by Nazi Germany's forces in World War II.
This is the story of the doing and the dying in the defining conflict of the 20th century.
His mother was a factory worker, and his father was a conscript in the Soviet Navy, serving in the submarine fleet in the early 1930s. Early in World War II, his father served in the destruction battalion of the NKVD. Later, he was transferred to the regular army and was severely wounded in 1942. Putin's maternal grandmother was killed by the German occupiers of Tver region in 1941, and his maternal uncles disappeared on the East Front during World War II. On 1 September 1960, Putin started at school number 193 at Baskov Lane, near his home. He was one of a few in the class of approximately 45 pupils who were not yet members of the Young Pioneer organization. At age 12, he began to practice sambo and judo. In his free time, he enjoyed reading the works of Marx, Engels and Lenin. Putin studied German at Saint Petersburg High School. Putin studied law at the Leningrad State University named after Andrei Zhdanov, now Saint Petersburg State University, in 1970 and graduated in 1975. His thesis was on the most favored nation trading principle in international law. While there, he was required to join the Communist Party of the Soviet Union and remained a member until it ceased to exist. It was outlawed in August 1991. Putin met Anatoly Sobchak, an assistant professor who taught business law and who later became the co-author of the Russian Constitution and of the corruption schemes persecuted in France. Putin would be influential in Sobchak's career in St. Petersburg. Sobchak would be influential in Putin's career in Moscow. Career. KGB career. In 1975, Putin joined the KGB and trained at the 401st KGB school in Okhta, Leningrad. After training, he worked in the 2nd Chief Directorate, Counterintelligence, before he was transferred to the 1st Chief Directorate, where he monitored foreigners and consular officials in Leningrad. In September 1984, Putin was sent to Moscow for further training at the Yuri Andropov Red Banner Institute. From 1985 to 1990, he served in Dresden, East Germany, using a cover identity as a translator. This period in his career is mostly unclear. Putin in the KGB, see 1980. Masha Gessen, a Russian-American who has authored a biography about Putin, claims Putin and his colleagues were reduced mainly to collecting press clippings, thus contributing to the mountains of useless information produced by the KGB. Putin's work was also downplayed by former Stasi spy chief Markus Wolf and Putin's former KGB colleague Vladimir Yeltsin. According to journalist Catherine Belton, this downplaying was actually cover for Putin's involvement in KGB coordination and support for the terrorist Red Army faction, whose members were frequently hiding in East Germany with support of the Stasi. And Dresden was preferred as a marginal town with low presence of Western intelligence services. According to an anonymous source, a former RAF member, at one of these meetings in Dresden, the militants presented Putin with a list of weapons that were later delivered to the RAF in West Germany. Klaus Zuckhold, who claimed to be recruited by Putin, said the latter also handled a neo-Nazi Rainer Sonntag and attempted to recruit an author of a study on poisons. Putin also reportedly met Germans to be recruited for wireless communications affairs together with an interpreter. He was involved in wireless communications technologies in Southeast Asia due to trips of German engineers recruited by him there and to the West. According to Putin's official biography, during the fall of the Berlin Wall that began on 9 November 1989, he saved the files of the Soviet Cultural Center, House of Friendship, and of the KGB villa in Dresden for the official authorities of the would-be United Germany to prevent demonstrators, including KGB and Stasi agents, from obtaining and destroying them. He then supposedly burnt only the KGB files in a few hours, but saved the archives of the Soviet Cultural Center for the German authorities. Nothing is told about the selection criteria during this burning, for example, concerning Stasi files, or about files of other agencies of the German Democratic Republic or of the USSR. He explained that many documents were left to Germany only because the furnace burst, but many documents of the KGB villa were sent to Moscow. After the collapse of the communist East German government, Putin was to resign from active KGB service because of suspicions aroused regarding his loyalty during demonstrations in Dresden and earlier, though the KGB and the Soviet Red Army still operated in eastern Germany. He returned to Leningrad in early 1990 as a member of the active reserves, where he worked for about 3 months with the International Affairs section of Leningrad State University, reporting to Vice-Rector Yuri Molchanov while working on his doctoral dissertation. There, he looked for new KGB recruits, watched the student body, and renewed his friendship with his former professor, Anatoly Sobchak, soon to be the mayor of Leningrad. Putin claims that he resigned with the rank of lieutenant colonel on 20 August 1991, on the second day of the 1991 Soviet coup d'etat attempt against the Soviet president Mikhail Gorbachev. Putin said, "As soon as the coup began, I immediately decided which side I was on," although he also noted that the choice was hard because he had spent the best part of his life with the organ. In 1999, Putin described communism as a blind alley, far away from the mainstream of civilization. Political career: 1990-1996, Saint Petersburg administration. In May 1990, Putin was appointed as an advisor on international affairs to the mayor of Leningrad Anatoly Sobchak. In a 2017 interview with Oliver Stone, Putin said that he resigned from the KGB in 1991, following the coup against Mikhail Gorbachev, as he did not agree with what had happened and did not want to be part of the intelligence in the new administration. According to Putin's statements in 2018 and 2021, he may have worked as a private taxi driver to earn extra money or considered such a job.
Если по-честному сказать, даже думал, что делать, может быть, там в такси подрабатывать или что. Я не шучу, серьезно. А куда деваться? Надо же было 2 детей маленьких.
On 28 June 1991, he became head of the Committee for External Relations of the Mayor's Office, with responsibility for promoting international relations and foreign investments and registering business ventures. Within a year, Putin was investigated by the City Legislative Council led by Marina Sali. It was concluded that he had understated prices and permitted the export of metals valued at $93 million in exchange for foreign food aid that never arrived. Despite the investigators' recommendation that Putin be fired, Putin remained head of the Committee for External Relations until 1996. From 1994 to 1996, he held several other political and governmental positions in Saint Petersburg. In March 1994, Putin was appointed as first deputy chairman of the government of Saint Petersburg. In May 1995, he organized the St. Petersburg branch of the pro-government Our Home Russia political party, the Liberal Party of Power founded by Prime Minister Viktor Chernomyrdin. In 1995, he managed the legislative election campaign for that party, and from 1995 through June 1997, he was the leader of its St. Petersburg branch. 1996-1999, early Moscow career. In June 1996, Sobchak lost his bid for re-election in St. Petersburg, and Putin, who had led his election campaign, resigned from his positions in the city administration. He moved to Moscow and was appointed as deputy chief of the Presidential Property Management Department headed by Pavel Borodin. He occupied this position until March 1997. He was responsible for the foreign property of the state and organized the transfer of the former assets of the Soviet Union and Communist Party to the Russian Federation. On 26 March 1997, President Boris Yeltsin appointed Putin deputy chief of the presidential staff, a post which he retained until May 1998, and chief of the main control directorate of the Presidential Property Management Department until June 1998. His predecessor in this position was Alexei Kudrin and his successor was Nikolai Patrushev, both future prominent politicians and Putin's associates. On 27 June 1997, at the Saint Petersburg Mining Institute, guided by Rector Vladimir Litvinenko, Putin defended his candidate of science dissertation in economics, titled The Strategic Planning of Regional Resources under the Formation of Market Relations. This exemplified the custom in Russia whereby a young rising official wrote a scholarly work in mid-career. When Putin later became president, the dissertation became a target of plagiarism accusations by fellows at the Brookings Institution after it was discovered that 15 pages were copied from an American textbook. Putin responded that the dissertation was referenced. The Brookings fellows asserted that it constituted plagiarism, albeit perhaps unintentional. The dissertation committee repudiated the accusations. On 25 May 1998, Putin was appointed first deputy chief of the presidential staff for the regions, in succession to Viktoria Matina, and, on 15 July, he was appointed head of the Commission for the Preparation of Agreements on the Delimitation of the Power of the Regions and head of the Federal Center attached to the president, replacing Sergei Shakray. After Putin's appointment, the commission completed no such agreements, although during Shakray's term as the head of the commission 46 such agreements had been signed. Later, after becoming president, Putin cancelled all 46 agreements. On 25 July 1998, Yeltsin appointed Putin director of the Federal Security Service, FSB, the primary intelligence and security organization of the Russian Federation, and the successor to the KGB. 1999. First premiership. On 9 August 1999, Putin was appointed one of three first deputy prime ministers and later on that day was appointed acting prime minister of the government of the Russian Federation by President Yeltsin. Yeltsin also announced that he wanted to see Putin as his successor. Later on, that same day, Putin agreed to run for the presidency. On 16 August, the State Duma approved his appointment as prime minister with 233 votes in favor versus 84 against, 17 abstained, while a simple majority of 226 was required, making him Russia's fifth PM in fewer than 18 months. On his appointment, few expected Putin, virtually unknown to the general public, to last any longer than his predecessors. He was initially regarded as a Yeltsin loyalist. Like other prime ministers of Boris Yeltsin, Putin did not choose ministers himself. His cabinet was determined by the presidential administration. Yeltsin's main opponents and would-be successors were already campaigning to replace the ailing president, and they fought hard to prevent Putin's emergence as a potential successor. Following the Russian apartment bombings and the invasion of Dagestan by Mujahideens, including the former KGB agents based in the Chechen Republic of Ichkeria, Putin's law and order image and unrelenting approach to the Second Chechen War soon combined to raise his popularity and allowed him to overtake his rivals. While not formally associated with any party, Putin pledged his support to the newly formed Unity Party, which won the second largest percentage of the popular vote, 23.3%, in the December 1999 Duma elections, and in turn supported Putin. (1999–2000) Acting presidency. On 31 December 1999, Yeltsin unexpectedly resigned and, according to the Constitution of Russia, Putin became acting president of the Russian Federation. On assuming this role, Putin went on a previously scheduled visit to Russian troops in Chechnya. The first presidential decree that Putin signed, on 31 December 1999, was titled On Guarantees for the Former President of the Russian Federation and the members of his family. This ensured that corruption charges against the outgoing president and his relatives would not be pursued. This was most notably targeted at the Mabitex bribery case in which Yeltsin's family members were involved. On 30 August 2000, a criminal investigation, number 18,238,278-95, in which Putin himself, as a member of the Saint Petersburg city government, was one of the suspects, was dropped. On 30 December 2000, yet another case against a prosecutor general was dropped for lack of evidence, despite thousands of documents having been forwarded by Swiss prosecutors. On 12 February 2001, Putin signed a similar federal law which replaced the decree of 1999. A case regarding Putin's alleged corruption in metal exports from 1992 was brought back by Marina Sally, but she was silenced and forced to leave Saint Petersburg. While his opponents had been preparing for an election in June 2000, Yeltsin's resignation resulted in the presidential elections being held within 3 months. On 26 March 2000, Putin won in the first round with 53% of the vote. 2000-2004. First presidential term. The inauguration of President Putin occurred on 7 May 2000. Putin appointed the Minister of Finance, Mikhail Kasyanov, as the Prime Minister. The first major challenge to Putin's popularity came in August 2000, when he was criticized for the alleged mishandling of the Kursk submarine disaster. That criticism was largely because it took several days for Putin to return from vacation, and several more before he visited the scene.
The maritime city of Saint Petersburg, on a day everyone remembers. It was 2 years ago that 118 submariners went to their deaths in the Barents Sea. Husbands, sons, fathers. 32 of the men are buried here. For 2 years, families have waited for the truth about these deaths. They've endured lies, threats, and cover-ups.
Between 2000 and 2004, Putin set about the reconstruction of the impoverished condition of the country, apparently winning a power struggle with the Russian oligarchs, reaching a grand bargain with them. This bargain allowed the oligarchs to maintain most of their powers in exchange for their explicit support for and alignment with Putin's government. The Moscow theater hostage crisis occurred in October 2002. Many in the Russian press and in the international media warned that the deaths of 130 hostages in the Special Forces rescue operation during the crisis would severely damage President Putin's popularity. However, shortly after the siege had ended, the Russian president enjoyed record public approval ratings. 83% of Russians declared themselves satisfied with Putin and his handling of the siege. In 2003, a referendum was held in Chechnya, adopting a new constitution which declares that the Republic of Chechnya is a part of Russia. On the other hand, the region did acquire autonomy. Chechnya has been gradually stabilized with the establishment of the parliamentary elections and a regional government. Throughout the Second Chechen War, Russia severely disabled the Chechen rebel movement. However, sporadic attacks by rebels continued to occur throughout the northern Caucasus. 2004-2008. Second presidential term. On 14 March 2004, Putin was elected to the presidency for a second term, receiving 71% of the vote. The Beslan school hostage crisis took place on 13 September 2004. More than 330 people died, including 186 children. The near 10-year period prior to the rise of Putin after the dissolution of Soviet rule was a time of upheaval in Russia. In a 2005 Kremlin speech, Putin characterized the collapse of the Soviet Union as the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century. Putin elaborated, moreover, the epidemic of disintegration infected Russia itself. The country's cradle-to-grave social safety net was gone, and life expectancy declined in the period preceding Putin's rule. In 2005, the national priority projects were launched to improve Russia's healthcare, education, housing, and agriculture. The continued criminal prosecution of Russia's then richest man, president of Yukoz's oil and gas company Mikhail Khodorkovsky, for fraud and tax evasion was seen by the international press as a retaliation for Khodorkovsky's donations to both liberal and communist opponents of the Kremlin. Khodorkovsky was arrested, Yukos was bankrupted, and the company's assets were auctioned at below market value, with the largest share acquired by the state company Rosneft. The fate of Yukos was seen as a sign of a broader shift of Russia towards a system of state capitalism. This was underscored in July 2014, when shareholders of Yukos were awarded $50 billion in compensation by the Permanent Arbitration Court in The Hague.
But after an epic 4-hour press conference yesterday, Mr. Putin announced that Russia's best-known prisoner had asked for a pardon, which would be granted.
He has already spent more than 10 years behind bars. It's a tough punishment. He's citing humanitarian reasons. His mother is ill.
The president's decree says the pardon was on humanitarian grounds. But Mr. Hodorkovsky says he has made no admission of guilt in exchange for freedom. Amnesty International claims he was a political prisoner, his real crime challenging the power of Mr. Putin himself.
On 7 October 2006, Anna Politkovskaya, a journalist who exposed corruption in the Russian army and its conduct in Chechnya, was shot in the lobby of her apartment building on Putin's birthday. The death of Politkovskaya triggered international criticism, with accusations that Putin had failed to protect the country's new independent media. Putin himself said that her death caused the government more problems than her writings.
The film shows how the tragedy bolstered the resolve of journalist Anna Politkovskaya to criticize the Russian government for the ongoing war in Chechnya and for human rights abuses there. According to the documentary, she had been doing that since the late 90s. In archival footage, she says there was an attempt on her life in 2004. She describes how during a flight en route to Chechnya, she was served poisoned tea.
Мне его принесли, и я практически сразу потеряла сознание. А очнулась уже поздно.
Она позвонила мне на мобильный телефон и сказала: я умираю. Видимо, меня отравили.
Потому что я поступила в аэропортовский медпункт без давления, без пульса. Это врачи зафиксировали.
2 years after this interview in October 2006, Politkovskaya was shot dead. The perpetrators are still at large.
In 2007, dissenters' marches were organized by the opposition group The Other Russia, led by former chess champion Garry Kasparov and National Bolshevist leader Edward Limonov. Following prior warnings, demonstrations in several Russian cities were met by police action, which included interfering with the travel of the protesters and the arrests of as many as 150 people who attempted to break through police lines. On 12 September 2007, Putin dissolved the government upon the request of Prime Minister Mikhail Fradkov. Fradkov commented that it was to give the president a free hand in the run-up to the parliamentary election. Viktor Zubkov was appointed the new prime minister. In December 2007, United Russia won 64.24% of the popular vote in their run for State Duma, according to election preliminary results. United Russia's victory in the December 2007 elections was seen by many as an indication of strong popular support of the then Russian leadership and its policies. 2008-2012, second premiership. Putin was barred from a third consecutive term by the constitution. First Deputy Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev was elected as successor. In a power-switching operation on 8 May 2008, only a day after handing the presidency to Medvedev, Putin was appointed Prime Minister of Russia, maintaining his political dominance. Putin has said that overcoming the consequences of the world economic crisis was one of the two main achievements of his second premiership. The other was stabilizing the size of Russia's population between 2008 and 2011 following a long period of demographic collapse that began in the 1990s. At the United Russia Congress in Moscow on 24 September 2011, Medvedev officially proposed that Putin stand for the presidency in 2012, an offer Putin accepted. Given United Russia's near-total dominance of Russian politics, many observers believed that Putin was assured of a third term. The move was expected to see Medvedev stand on the United Russia ticket in the parliamentary elections in December, with a goal of becoming prime minister at the end of his presidential term. After the parliamentary elections on 4 December 2011, tens of thousands of Russians engaged in protests against alleged electoral fraud, the largest protests in Putin's time. Protesters criticized Putin and United Russia and demanded annulment of the election results. Those protests sparked the fear of a color revolution in society. Putin allegedly organized a number of paramilitary groups loyal to himself and to the United Russia Party in the period between 2005 and 2012.
Run again for Russia's presidency. The response was mass demonstrations in Moscow's streets. Protests which had to be put down by police.
2012-2018, third presidential term. On 24 September 2011, while speaking at the United Russia Party Congress, Medvedev announced that he would recommend the party nominate Putin as its presidential candidate. He also revealed that the two men had long ago cut a deal to allow Putin to run for president in 2012. This switch was termed by many in the media as Rokorovka, the Russian term for the chess move, castling. On 4 March 2012, Putin won the 2012 Russian presidential elections in the first round, with 63.6% of the vote, despite widespread accusations of vote rigging. Opposition groups accused Putin and the United Russia Party of fraud. While efforts to make the elections transparent were publicized, including the usage of webcams in polling stations, the vote was criticized by the Russian opposition and by international observers from the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe for procedural irregularities.
Putin announces his candidacy for president and wins the 2012 election by a preposterous margin.
Injustice, says Dmitry. This outrage can't continue. I'm here to say no to Putin.
Putin starts his third term once again amid chaos.
Anti-Putin protests took place during and directly after the presidential campaign. The most notorious protest was the Pussy Riot performance on 21 February and subsequent trial. An estimated 8,000–20,000 protesters gathered in Moscow on 6 May, when 80 people were injured in confrontations with police and 450 were arrested, with another 120 arrests taking place the following day. A counter-protest of Putin supporters occurred which culminated in a gathering of an estimated 130,000 supporters at the Leningrad Stadium, Russia's largest stadium. Some of the attendees stated that they had been paid to come, were forced to come by their employers, or were misled into believing that they were going to attend a folk festival instead. The rally is considered to be the largest in support of Putin to date. Putin's presidency was inaugurated in the Kremlin on 7 May 2012. On his first day as president, Putin issued 14 presidential decrees, which are sometimes called the May Decrees by the media, including a lengthy one stating wide-ranging goals for the Russian economy. Other decrees concerned education, housing, skilled labor training, relations with the European Union, the defense industry, inter-ethnic relations, and other policy areas dealt with in Putin's program articles issued during the presidential campaign. In 2012 and 2013, Putin and the United Russia Party backed stricter legislation against the LGBT community in Saint Petersburg, Arkhangelsk, and Novosibirsk, a law called the Russian Gay Propaganda Law, that is against homosexual propaganda, which prohibits such symbols as the rainbow flag as well as published works containing homosexual content, was adopted by the State Duma in June 2013. Responding to international concerns about Russia's legislation, Putin asked critics to note that the law was a ban on the propaganda of pedophilia and homosexuality, and he stated that homosexual visitors to the 2014 Winter Olympics should leave the children in peace, but denied there was any professional, career or social discrimination against homosexuals in Russia.
A law prohibiting propaganda, and not of homosexuality only, but of homosexuality and child abuse, child sexual abuse. But this is nothing to do with persecuting individuals for their sexual orientation.
за их сексуальную ориентацию. Это две большие разницы, как у нас говорят.
There is a world of difference between these two things. So there is no danger for individuals of this non-traditional sexual orientation who are planning to come to the games as visitors or participants.
In June 2013, Putin attended a televised rally of the All Russia People's Front, where he was elected head of the movement, which was set up in 2011. According to journalist Steve Rosenberg, the movement is intended to reconnect the Kremlin to the Russian people and one day, if necessary, replace the increasingly unpopular United Russia Party that currently backs Putin. 2018 present. Fourth presidential term. Putin won the 2018 presidential election with more than 76% of the vote. His fourth term began on 7 May 2018 and will last until 2024. On the same day, Putin invited Dmitry Medvedev to form a new government. On 15 May 2018, Putin took part in the opening of the movement along the highway section of the Crimean Bridge. On 18 May 2018, Putin signed decrees on the composition of the new government. On 25 May 2018, Putin announced that he would not run for president in 2024, justifying this in compliance with the Russian constitution. On 14 June 2018, Putin opened the 21st FIFA World Cup, which took place in Russia for the first time.
Abramovich and other wealthy Russians are expected to pay for important projects, like hosting the 2018 World Cup.
Я не исключаю, что господин Абрамович может принять участие в одном из таких проектов. Но пусть раскошелится немножко, ничего страшного, у него будет, у него много там денег.
The FIFA World Cup, ladies and gentlemen, will be organized in Russia.
In September 2019, Putin's administration interfered with the results of Russia's nationwide regional elections and manipulated it by eliminating all candidates in the opposition. The event that was aimed at contributing to the ruling party, United Russia's victory, also contributed to inciting mass protests for democracy, leading to large-scale arrests and cases of police brutality. On the same day, Putin nominated Mikhail Mishustin, head of the country's federal tax service, for the post of prime minister. The next day, he was confirmed by the State Duma to the post and appointed prime minister by Putin's decree. This was the first time ever that a PM was confirmed without any votes against. On 21 January 2020, Mishustin presented to Vladimir Putin a draft structure of his cabinet. On the same day, the president signed a decree on the structure of the cabinet and appointed the proposed ministers.
Has democracy been destroyed in Russia?
100%. Personal life.
Family. On 28 July 1983, Putin married Lyudmila Shkrabneva, and they lived together in East Germany from 1985 to 1990. They have two daughters, Maria Putina, born 28 April 1985 in Leningrad, and Ekaterina Putina, born 31 August 1986 in Dresden, East Germany. An investigation by Proc Media published in November 2020 alleged that Putin has another daughter, Elizaveta, known as Luiza Rozova, born March 2003, with Svetlana Kravanagic. On 6 June 2013, Putin and Lyudmila announced that their marriage was over, and, on 1 April 2014, the Kremlin confirmed that the divorce had been finalized. In 2015, Kabeva reportedly gave birth to a daughter. Putin is alleged to be the father. In 2019, Kabeva reportedly gave birth to twin sons by Putin. Putin has two grandsons, born in 2012 and 2017. His cousin, Igor Putin, was a director at Moscow-based Master Bank and was accused in a number of money laundering scandals.
Personal wealth.
Official figures released during the legislative election of 2007 put Putin's wealth at approximately 3.7 million rubles, US $150,000, in bank accounts, a private 77.4 square meter, 833 sq feet apartment in Saint Petersburg, and miscellaneous other assets. Putin's reported 2006 income totaled 2 million rubles, approximately $80,000. In 2012, Putin reported an income of 3.6 million rubles, $113,000. Putin has been photographed wearing a number of expensive wristwatches, collectively valued at $700,000, nearly 6 times his annual salary. Putin has been known on occasion to give watches valued at thousands of dollars as gifts to peasants and factory workers. According to Russian opposition politicians and journalists, Putin secretly possesses a multi-billion-dollar fortune via successive ownership of stakes in a number of Russian companies. According to one editorial in the Washington Post, Putin might not technically own these 43 aircraft, but, as the sole political power in Russia, he can act like they're his. Russian RIA journalist argued that Western intelligence agencies could not find anything. These contradictory claims were analyzed by Polygraph.info, which looked at the number of reports by Western, Anders Östlund estimate of $160 billion, and Russian, Stanislav Bulkovsky estimated of $40 billion, analysts. CIA, estimate of $40 billion in 2007, as well as counter-arguments of Russian media. Polygraph concluded, there is uncertainty on the precise sum of Putin's wealth, and the assessment by the Director of U.S. National Intelligence apparently is not yet complete. However, with the pile of evidence and documents in the Panama Papers and in the hands of independent investigators such as those cited by Deutsche, Polygraph.info finds that Danilov's claim that Western intelligence agencies have not been able to find evidence of Putin's wealth to be misleading. Polygraph.info, are Putin's billions a myth? In April 2016, 11 million documents belonging to Panamanian law firm Mossack Fonseca were leaked to the German newspaper Süddeutsche Zeitung and the Washington-based International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. The name of Vladimir Putin does not appear in any of the records, and Putin denied his involvement with the company. However, various media have reported on 3 of Putin's associates on the list. According to the Panama Papers leak, close trusted associates of Putin own offshore companies worth US $2 billion in total. The German newspaper Süddeutsche Zeitung regards the possibility of Putin's family profiting from this money as plausible. According to the paper, the US $2 billion had been secretly shuffled through banks and shadow companies linked to Putin's associates, such as construction billionaires Arkady and Boris Rotenberg and Bank Russia. Previously identified by the US State Department as being treated by Putin as his personal bank account, had been central in facilitating this. It concludes that Putin has shown he is willing to take aggressive steps to maintain secrecy and protect such communal assets. A significant proportion of the money trail leads to Putin's best friend Sergei Roljigin. Although a musician, and in his own words, not a businessman, it appears he has accumulated assets valued at $100 million and possibly more. It has been suggested he was picked for the role because of his low profile. There have been speculations that Putin, in fact, owns the funds and Roljigin just acted as a proxy. Garry Kasparov said, Putin controls enough money, probably more than any other individual in the history of human race.
Him enriching his friends, his close allies, and marginalizing those who he doesn't view as friends, using state assets, whether that's Russia's energy wealth, whether it's other state contracts. He directs those to whom he believes will serve him and excludes those who don't.
Residences.
Official government residences. As president and prime minister, Putin has lived in numerous official residences throughout the country. These residences include the Moscow Kremlin, Novo-Ogaryovo in Moscow Oblast, Gorky 9 Ru near Moscow, Bocharov Ruchi in Sochi, Dolgy Ubority Ru in Novgorod Oblast, and Riviera in Sochi. In August 2012, critics of Putin listed the ownership of 20 villas and palaces, 9 of which were built during Putin's 12 years in power. Personal residences. Soon after Putin returned from his KGB service in Dresden, East Germany, he built a dacha in Solovyovka on the eastern shore of Lake Komsomolskoye on the Karelian Isthmus in Pryozersky district of Leningrad Oblast, near Saint Petersburg. After the dacha burned down in 1996, Putin built a new one identical to the original and was joined by a group of 7 friends who built dachas nearby. In 1996, the group formally registered their fraternity as a cooperative society, calling it Azero, Lake, and turning it into a gated community. A massive Italianate-style mansion costing an alleged US $1 billion and dubbed Putin's Palace is under construction near the Black Sea village of Praskavivka. In 2012, Sergei Kolesnikov, a former business associate of Putin's, told the BBC's Newsnight program that he had been ordered by Deputy Prime Minister Igor Sechin to oversee the building of the palace. He also said that the mansion, built on government land and sporting 3 helipads, a private road paid for from state funds, and guarded by officials wearing uniforms of the official Kremlin Guard service, have been built for Putin's private use. Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov dismissed Kolesnikov's allegations against Putin as untrue, saying that Putin has never had any relationship to this palace. On 19 January 2021, 2 days after Alexei Navalny was detained by Russian authorities upon his return to Russia, a video investigation by him and the Anti-Corruption Foundation, FBK, was published accusing Putin of using fraudulently obtained funds to build the estate for himself in what he called the world's biggest bribe. In the investigation, Navalny said that the estate is 39 times the size of Monaco and cost over 100 billion rubles, $1.35 billion, to construct. It also showed aerial footage of the estate via a drone and a detailed floorplan of the palace that Navalny said was given by a contractor, which he compared to photographs from inside the palace that were leaked onto the internet in 2011. He also detailed an elaborate corruption scheme allegedly involving Putin's inner circle that allowed Putin to hide billions of dollars to build the estate.
Pets.
Putin has received 5 dogs from various nation leaders: Connie, Buffy, Yum, Vernie, and Pasha. Connie died in 2014. When Putin first became president, the family had 2 poodles, Tasya and Rodeo. They reportedly stayed with his ex-wife Lyudmila after their divorce.
Religion.
Putin is Russian Orthodox. His mother was a devoted Christian believer who attended the Russian Orthodox Church, while his father was an atheist. Though his mother kept no icons at home, she attended church regularly, despite government persecution of her religion at that time. His mother secretly baptized him as a baby, and she regularly took him to services. According to Putin, His religious awakening began after a serious car crash involving his wife in 1993 and a life-threatening fire that burned down their dacha in August 1996. Shortly before an official visit to Israel, Putin's mother gave him his baptismal cross, telling him to get it blessed. Putin states, "I did as she said, and then put the cross around my neck. I have never taken it off since." When asked in 2007 whether he believes in God, he responded, "There are things I believe, which should not in my position, at least, be shared with the public at large for everybody's consumption, because that would look like self-advertising or a political striptease." Putin's rumored confessor is Russian Orthodox Bishop Tikhon Shevchenov. However, the sincerity of his Christianity has been rejected by his former advisor Sergei Pugachev.
Sports.
Putin watches football and supports FC Zenit Saint Petersburg. He also displays an interest in ice hockey and bandy. Putin has been practicing judo since he was 11 years old before switching to sambo at the age of 14. He won competitions in both sports in Leningrad, now St. Petersburg. He was awarded 8th Dan of the Black Belt in 2012, becoming the first Russian to achieve the status. Putin also practices karate. He co-authored a book entitled Judo with Vladimir Putin in Russian and Judo, History, Theory, and Practice in English, 2004. Benjamin Witz, a black belt in Taekwondo and Aikido and editor of Lawfare, has disputed Putin's martial arts skills, stating that there is no video evidence of Putin displaying any real noteworthy judo skills.